Hi, everybody. It's Rick DiClemente with Astrology Unplugged. Good to have you with us tonight. Tonight, my special guest will be Rick Cempie. He's a part-timer here anyway. And the main reason is I want to get into the subject of asteroids, and I really don't know much about them. I'm fascinated by them, mainly when I hear Rick talk about it. So, welcome, Rick.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here
Good to have
talking
you
about
with.
asteroids.
Yeah, good to have you with us. I have a lot of questions for you. Um, Mainly how you keep track of all of them, but for the beginners,
Hmm.
you could fill me in on the second belt. The first asteroid belt lies between Jupiter and Mars, and in what it looks like, I believe it is a busted up planet. It was a planet that
That's
blew up years
seems to
ago
be a thought. Yeah.
into many bits and pieces. And the main asteroid belt is the one between Jupiter and Mars. And what I understood recently really made it make a lot more sense because you watch all these sci-fi movies and you wonder how the ships flying between all these floating bricks and floating stones. Um, they're really,
Agreed.
really, they're really, really far apart, like hundreds of thousands of light years apart. So anyhow, it's really good to know that. But anyhow, there are some people who study the asteroids closely. There are some people who don't. I've never taken the time for it because I've been so busy with the outer planets. How'd you get into it, Rick?
Um, I certainly started with Chiron before I even concerned myself with Ceres and uh, Juno, Vesta, Pallas. Those were not even on my radar when I was focused on Chiron. But then somewhere, 15 to 20 years ago, I did start jumping into this and I was really excited. It was some fascinating things. There is some great work that Zane Stein took his scholarship and went and dealt with the centaurs.
Yeah, is
That's
it?
old work.
I believe Chiron is a centaur.
Yes, that's right.
And
And
centaur just means it's between Saturn and Neptune, right?
predominantly that's what I understand.
Yeah.
And they all get that type of a name. And
Yeah.
of the myths that individuate them, Chiron and only Pholus are the only ones ever depicted as having human legs on the front half,
Oh, okay.
suggesting they have a more refined reaction in their perspective as to how they interact. The others that are fully horse legged centaurs are considered rowdier.
Is
They're a
that
little
right?
rougher. Yeah. They're the ones that I refer to as the drunken frat boys.
How do you keep track of all of them?
Well, they are characters in stories. And if you can imagine a big ensemble cast with a lot of characters, that's essentially how I see the myth. And it is their stories that relate somewhat to central figures. Like you have a whole bunch, uh, well, look at Zeus. If you were to just go ahead and figure out who all he bedded and chased after, you get a lot of female asteroids. You get a lot of heroes that are born from his illicit liaisons. You just find a lot of stories, and then you have other stories as well.
Yeah, but
You know,
Zeus is not an asteroid.
correct. That's the Greek name for Jupiter.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I switch back and forth because I read the myths in Greek with the Greek names, and then I have to translate it back thinking about the Roman names because that's where we get from more Latin roots. And in fact, there's a lot of Latin usage with the naming of asteroids. They will turn any name and make it look Latin
Is that right?
and feminine as well.
Well,
I think that has to do with something that I feel is connected historically with Uranus, to be honest.
why is that?
When you look at the story of Uranus, there was a suppression of Gaia. He is described as having smothered her with his presence and wanted all her children, his children with her, to be kept in that suppressed state. So they were kept underground. It eventually infuriated Gaia so much, wanting to release her children, that that's when she decided to create the sickle for Cronus, also known as Saturn, where we get the idea of the Grim Reaper, so that he could attack Uranus, call it quits. And when you look at the whole layout of the discovery chart of Uranus, you also see Gaia conjoin the ascendant, the asteroid Gaia, for Mother Earth in the 12th house, suggesting a bit of a rising energy for her. It's really fascinating. That release has several different things that point to an increase in the feminine. And at the same time that was happening, at the discovery, we had changes globally, not just with European based nations, but we know about the US and its freedom. And then shortly after, you had the French Revolution. But at the same time, multiple nations in South America, which are kind of marginalized because of the fact that they are full of indigenous people who were suppressed by European white nations that were in exploration and exploitation of those people. Well, with that, it tends to silence its record in history. And I found 3 or 4, if not more, women, female indigenous parties that were leading revolutions against Spain from different locations, as well as Portugal. So there were uprisings trying to shake off the tyranny of monarchy. It was this rise in the individuality, a Uranian
Oh,
concept.
don't you think that's going on right now?
Oh, it's so clearly going on now. We are pushing the awakening further. I think it has a lot to do with the Uranian energies that are current.
Well,
And
first of all, how do you how do you handle that Gaia is a name for Earth, but it's also the name of an asteroid?
it is determined by the astronomers.
Well,
The name of,
that's a bad place to put it.
well, that we were 500 years ago, Rick, we were the astronomers.
Yeah, I know.
There was just a what do you call it? A modern shift to separate and then elevate academia, in spite of the fact that all the doctors were all astrologers. There were no doctors who were not astrologers at that time.
Right.
So it's vital to recognize, and this is one of the things I think is important about medical astrology too, because if we can see what someone is dealing with physically, we can then reverse engineer and say, okay, what planetary stresses are there that might give you something to work on spiritually to try and fix your energy flow so that you can have less leakage and loss of vitality,
Well, let me
which
add.
you have said in different words, you have to get unblocked.
Right. Well, let me add to this before I forget it, and this is of interest, I think. The symbol RX stands for radix, and radix is another name for a natal chart. The radix chart is the birth chart, and that's why the doctors back in those days would put an RX on the on the patient's sheet. That meant when the doctor put an RX there, that meant that the doctor has seen the natal chart. I have seen it. I've studied it. Thank you. So I mark it off. That's where
Yeah.
RX comes from.
And it's where you get the modern pharmacopoeia um, abbreviation for prescription. You find it on all of your medical documentation, the RX. You still see it on some of the pharmacies used in their logos.
Well, let me ask you something. Since Zeus is Jupiter and Zeus is really the king of all, how come in some mythological stories Zeus doesn't always come out on top?
He's very much a representation of humanity in his flaws as well as his superiority. And he is the grandson of the big daddy Uranus.
The big daddy's Uranus.
Right. That is, see, first, in the beginning, there was chaos. From chaos came Gaia. From Gaia, we had Uranus. Then Uranus and Gaia
Are
together.
you saying that Eris is the same as chaos?
In that cosmology, I don't believe they are quite the same, but they could certainly be related. That one's a tricky one for me to remember. I think that's more of a meaning for her because there was an actual energy referred to as chaos that was part of what precipitated. It was sort of like the Big Bang in that
It
concept.
started all with chaos.
Right. Yeah.
Can I ask a
Well,
question?
I'm okay with that.
Has anybody noticed that there's this new show? I think it might be on Netflix, and it's about the gods on Olympics. And I think Jeff Goldblum plays Zeus. I haven't gotten into it, but they've got all the gods playing characters like in a sitcom or something. And I'm going to start watching it to see how
I heard about
closely
it.
it might
I
follow
had not heard
something.
about it, but I'll certainly look it up. Is that Netflix?
I think it might be Netflix. Let me look
Oh,
at. Linda says yes.
okay.
Anybody know what the name of it is? But imagine Jeff Goldblum as Thor or Zeus.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun to be had with it, and with that rise of freedom and awakening, you had incredible intellectual advances. You had um, a furthering of things that were begun hundreds of years prior with the Magna Carta during King Henry VIII. One of the things I look at a lot is history, because history helps us see what these things have been a part of. And then you have the shift of individuals to have the US no longer under a monarchy was a huge boon. It really pushed us forward. And then we had stepped into industrialization. It was, in one way, it was very liberating because it provided a little bit more of a living than just farming. because the farming was somewhat just like get by, feed yourself, have a few dollars to buy things that you need to grow things so you can feed yourself. It wasn't um it wasn't going to go further like business would. Business was much more lucrative.
Well, when you
So that was a big shift.
when you study all the asteroids and they move in reality, they move at a similar speed as Mars and Jupiter.
Yes.
Mars is once every 2 years, Jupiter's once every 12 years. So somewhere in between there. You have to look up, if you're doing a natal chart, you have to look up all the asteroids for each person. How how can you possibly do that when there are thousands of asteroids?
Right. And even if you're just keeping it tight at the asteroid belt that you're referencing, that's about 12,000 asteroids that were named that have about a 4 year orbit.
Orbit. Mm.
So, what I do is I prefer to have an interview ahead of time with my client and I get information. Tell me about your repeating cycles because that's very important. Uh, and I draw their attention to things that happened before they were even went to grade school, if they remember anything that would then later repeat. And this could be health issues or dynamics of behavior, socialization, grade school, high school, or 20s, 30s, and on. What is repeating? You get into a social drama and what occurs?
So are you saying that these asteroids are pretty much as powerful as a planet?
I it's not that I would say that because if the, but here's the thing, when they are spot onto a space where they're activated, they're undeniable.
Is that right?
Undeniable.
What kind of orb do you use with asteroids?
Well, I was just getting to that. So I straightened out my I wanted to get ready for this and I listened to a video from Demetra George. She will go beyond the 1 to 2 degrees to up to 3 degrees, but she's also very tight the way she keeps that, in the sense that she wants to see it connected to the luminaries primarily or the angles.
Is
But
that
at
right? Is
that,
that right?
even the even if it's connected to the planets, that's important at some level, especially once you consider, once you connect to the planets, you're also connecting to aspect patterns. And that's going to strengthen the point in the zodiac where that little bitty space rock now has a bigger important meaning. And the other key that I use, Melanie Reinhardt has been doing astrology for decades as well. And she understands and has familiarity with classical astrology and tight orbs, regimented math, and she found herself sitting in front of clients that were very clearly illuminating their life experience. And what she was hearing was evidence that the orb didn't seem to matter in some ways because they were exhibiting this is conjunct or this is square, even though it was out of range by a little longer. How do you deny somebody's life experience? I can't, you know? So I think there's relevance to having the larger orb. And when you see other evidence to support that, I would never just go off road and say, "Oh, that good enough for government work on that." No, I'm going to look and see what do you have in your life.
Okay, so if you see a what is it? What is one of the asteroids that you follow commonly?
Commonly, I look at Ophelia.
Ophelia. And
Yeah.
where is she at the moment?
Currently, I don't know because I'm only looking at birth charts. Ophelia really deals with a birth chart. It shows a point of over emotionally charged reactions
Huh.
that can lead to despair. And the reason that I look at that, it goes back to Chiron. I look at any soul in a progression. I try to see where have they come from in previous lives. What does it look like they have been previously wounded by? Because I think that that wound is being repeated when you go and look at Chiron. Because how can you have an extreme childhood reaction to something that is truly going to be much less of an impact, except for the fact that some of these childhood wounds are because your bags are packed when you get here. That's why I feel there's an important reason to go ahead and recognize that some of these current unfolding experiences are a repetition of previous life patterns.
Why is there such a connotation of bruising or wounding with all the asteroids?
Well, it's predominantly with Chiron. The other, but there are like Nessus is definitely a wounding thing of sorts, and that's involved with the asteroid Heracles and Dejanira. Dejanira is the asteroid of abuse. That was the wife of Hercules, and in so the way the characters are wrapped up, Nessus the centaur carries Dejanira over a body of water and gets to the other side of the shore before Hercules does. Hercules sees that Nessus violates his wife and shoots the centaur from a distance with a poison arrow. The poison arrow then infects him, kills him, but with his dying breath, he gives his blood-stained shirt to Dejanira and tricks her into believing that if Hercules ever strays, just put this shirt on him. It'll make him faithful. But really, it's poison blood. It's going to kill him, and that was the end of him. That's how he ended up.
So we just had a question about showing an example. Well, the whole point is that you can put a thousand other points on the chart,
Sure.
and they're just more points at some random place in the chart.
Right.
So you have to look up, and whenever somebody's born, you have to look up where these positions are. And I would imagine then you place these points on the chart, and I would imagine that you would put a lot of extra emphasis if the sun is conjunct one of these points, or if the moon is opposite, et cetera, et
That
cetera.
too. Mm-hmm.
So, how do you do when you are reading and you have so many points to contend with?
Well, you they have. I know that Demetra has databases, and they're out there using Mark Pottinger's work.
I
CRF.
see.
You were familiar with it?
I thought it was Rick Pottinger.
Um, Zipporah Dobbins' son. I can't remember.
I see.
Yeah, uh, and that work uses I think they use a database much like the one we were talking about who does the medical astrology, Martha Lang Westcott.
Yeah.
Yeah, and plugs them in. They look to get about 500. There's only 360 degrees in a circle, so they're really trying to narrow down they're going to use names of important people, like children of someone, see if something hits. Family members, city and country names, things that may have been important
You
to
give me
someone.
an example, please.
Like Paris. Paris is actually one that shows up in Demetra's example, where she deals with Princess Diana, where you can see that uh, she Diana has a connection with Paris in her chart. And then at the time of her death, the asteroid Karma is transiting right at the Paris Diana conjunction. Very fascinating.
So you're talking about the British Queen,
The Princess of Wales.
the
Yeah,
princess. Yeah.
yeah. So there are, and I'll tell you what, if you want to catch some, there sometimes they may be a little bit wide of an orb, but regardless, Alex's asteroids, Alex Miller is the name of the astrologer. He does a column with regular blog entries, I guess they would be, and he sends out his information quite regularly. It really pulls out some amazing things, and he's using figures that are very well known, like Judge Kavanaugh, when they were going through his vetting process, bringing all the names forward. Personal named asteroids are one that is commonly used in a lot of the work. There are also qualities like abundance and patience and fraternity. Those types
So
of
what's
qualities.
going on now with this phenomenon? I think it's Eris, but what's going on with this phenomenal sense of we're not going back? You can feel that in the collective now. We're not going back. Is that connected with the centaurs or with asteroid?
Well, that being such a large connection. See, the asteroids are only very tightly used in orb, and they're only going to be set up by people's natal charts. What you're talking about is a global, worldwide
Right. Well,
thing.
why are we getting this world reaction of we're not going back? It seems to be very Arisian.
I can't remember where it sits. It's somewhere at the top of the chart, but in the US chart alone, I do recall finding that the natal chaos asteroid was very prominent. I can't remember where it is though. I do know though, when you talk about global wide, you're talking about many, many people. That's a planetary thing more than an asteroid thing.
Okay, well, that could be Eris.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I kind of don't jump on Eris as asteroid because it is outer planet in my thinking, even though
Yeah,
they'll call it
that's right. It is outer planet.
asteroid.
Right.
Yeah, uh, it's
Boy, she's
tricky to go
very
ahead and,
strong. She's very strong right now.
in a subtle way, because mostly because modern culture is disconnected with myth. So we don't know her story as a collective. We know it unconsciously as an urge. And I see Eris in the Uranus discovery chart having a play considerably. And that's another thing that I think is important. When you look at those discovery charts and you find what's going on there, those planets then come into they add the dynamic of their story to Uranus or whatever other major space rock we're talking about. So uh, we could probably find quite a bit looking just at the discovery chart of Eris at some point and plugging in some of those other things. I remember recently having an issue with someone where I'm hearing what they're saying and I'm thinking, this person wasn't believed by psychics when she was predicting something. And I thought, boy, that sounds a lot like the story of Cassandra. That was the prophetess in the they have too many seas in the Mediterranean, but she was with Jason, and her prophecies were not believed. And when I looked deeper and I plugged uh, the asteroid in, Cassandra played a very prominent role. And that's basically how I roll with trying to find things out. Find out what is at play in the nuance. And when you have the nuance, you kind of blow up and explode the meaning of the story. Claudia, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I have probably a few, but the one that comes to mind right now is when you cast a chart, do you have go-tos that are you're going to have
Yeah.
those on your charts, and then if something triggers something in your thinking, let me look at this for this person, like you just said, Cassandra, is that something that you always put on your?
Not
Okay.
Cassandra.
Okay.
I always use the asteroid Karma. That's one of my go-tos because it's like an extra hand of Saturn, you know?
Right.
I look at shadow because it's a part of the human psyche. I use the asteroid psyche. And
Isn't there one called Rick?
you know what? They are named after because astronomers
Yeah.
get to name them. It amazed me since Tuesday. I went looking. There's more than one. Apparently, because they're naming them after family members, Richard must be a name people love. Astronomers must enjoy naming their kids Rick because there's a lot of them. Richard Starr, Richard Cook, Richard Baker, Spalding, Beatty, French, uh, and of course Richard, just plain Richard. But there's so many more than I thought. There's at least 2 to 3 more times than what I've listed.
Yeah.
That
So I remember you actually sent me my chart last year with
uh-huh.
the asteroids. And I thought, oh my gosh, how does he do it? Because it's quite busy. In
It
fact,
is.
I have it pulled up, and it's a lot. So I
I
think,
choose them from your own story and
mhm,
what I can sense in your words.
okay.
Uh-huh. Um, with Shadow, Psyche, Ophelia, um, oh, uh, there's a couple others. I'm remembering numbers instead of like 157 is Ophelia and 171 Dejanira. Dejanira is an important one. I look at that one all the time because Dejanira as the point of abuse is going to tell me something about the nature of how Chiron's wound ends up unfolding.
Oh,
That's the reason I use it. And Chiron and Nessus both being centaurs, and Hercules playing a lot, having a lot of screen time with the other centaurs is part of the reason they're intertwined. And the archetype of Hercules is every human being. The meaning of Hercules is all about striving. So the 12 labors of Hercules given to him by Hera are essentially the zodiac signs that he's moving through as he's getting different labors accomplished. So it shows the capacity of any person to overcome their own adversity. So, in a sense, it is the hero's journey.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I
Mhm.
find that to be illuminating. Ran into somebody who has Hercules right on the nadir. Think I've run into somebody who has it right on the midheaven. Another one that anything that shows up in the ascendant is amazing. I have found more than one person with Sisyphus on the ascendant, like Groundhog Day every day. You know, that does not sound fun if you remember the story. You're pushing a boulder up the hill every day, and
Or
you wake up at the bottom with the
Sisyphus.
yes, Sisyphus. Yeah, it. But there's an interesting story that Demetra George shares about the event of the attack Lorena Bobbitt committed on John, with Venus conjoined Lorena. There was a different name for John. It's a foreign name. It's not. But it is one of the. Oh, it was. I think it was Johann. Johann is connected with a masculine aggressive. I think it may have been Mars, and unless Mars is with Pecker, and that is actually an asteroid. How these things come about, they're usually someone's name. Remember
Mhm.
the congressperson by the name of Wiener who ended up
Yeah, right,
getting caught with
right,
photos?
right.
Well, that happens to be the name from some German scientists getting an asteroid named after him. But then the culture unfolds, and then you find out that when people have that asteroid triggered negatively, they better not be sending their revealing photos to anyone, because they get found out. And
Yeah,
it,
he really
again, like,
did.
trigger is important. Like, only a powerful person like a politician can find any threat from Damocles. Damocles won't affect any of us. We don't hold that public power. But when you do, and it's triggered, look out. There's a lot of fascinating things written about Trump's chart with asteroids as well.
I would imagine.
Yeah, he has also fixed stars that are keeping him protected.
So a fixed star is a star in a certain place in the zodiac that appears to be fixed. Like it's so far
Yes,
away that it ain't going anywhere.
right. Yeah.
And we have Regulus or
Yes, 29 degrees of Leo, or it may have moved into Virgo, but I was born under with that star in my Mercury.
so by the time you look at the fixed stars and the asteroids and the planets, I mean you got a plate full.
Yeah, but the ideas to understand the depth of an individual just explode, because you're getting insider information that honestly they don't even have. Much of these things happen beyond a spectrum that humans can understand. We can only see so much of our own existence. Most of it happens beyond our ability to see. This is why I tell people quite often your closest friends sometimes know the decision you'll make in a situation better than you do, because they know when push comes to shove, this is the way you're going to roll. But we're going to go ahead and torture ourselves through it anyway. And it takes us a while to come to the decision, but oftentimes people do know what we're going through to get to the end, or how we get to the end, they don't know, but they do know what the end's going to be.
Well, how do you possibly get a reading finished and feel satisfied about it?
Oh, the the insights that are grasped touch such incredible points. It not only finds its way through to an astrology reading, but just in doing an interview with someone, I spent time with a young man dealing with toxic anger, trying to help him come to the place where he would get a reading. And he did not get a reading, but he actually felt better just in the interview the interview process, because he told me, I'm actually shocked. I've been to multiple therapists, and I've actually told you more than I've told 5 therapists in my entire history of going into therapy, as far as the depth and the revealing of reality. Because there is something about the connection of knowing something so hidden that people realize you see something. And it is profound. It's nuanced. We can tell people about the major energies, Venus and Mars and Jupiter, but when you start talking to people about experiences that are much different, or you start, one of the tools you used was solar arcs. I used solar arcs one time, and I found a bunch of spaces all over the chart that were triggering similar year spans. It wasn't just 2 points come together. It was
Right.
2 here, 2 there, 2 here. And I said something to the effect that, there's this one year, and I pointed out summer when he had turned 18. And I don't go into the gore of how bad it looks like, but I tell people what other things were going on at the time and how it stressed and wounded your individuality. How did you interpret this aggression in your life? What was happening to you? And when I described the aggression against him, and then the other things going on in his life at the very same time, he said, and this is a young man in his late 20s, physically very grounded, centered. He was a physical trainer. And it was before he had bulked up, and this incident had occurred, because it had been over 10 years. That's when he said, I had a run-in with the law. I was overnight in Pittsburgh jail, got let out on a cold summer evening with no ride, wearing shorts. He got picked up by a nefarious character and ended up getting attacked. And to acknowledge and admit that, because of the gore of the difficulty of the attack, that was a big deal. But he saw all the pieces come into place. He could not help but just own it. And that's what ends up happening when you put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and you're not just putting one, you're putting together multiple layers. That's when the sitter knows, this person doesn't know me from Adam, but what he says is math adds up to exactly what I went through. And people know their experiences are unique to them. Never would have happened to anybody else that way, because they're born in a different location, different time.
Well, when you see how in the natal chart, when you see how many episodes in their life are tied to their 12th harmonic, and you can see pretty clearly that there's no doubt about it. What's causing these people to have certain histories?
I actually only recently, with your with exposure to you using the 12th, have I started, and I really didn't start as much as just recently getting the facility with solar fire, because I don't feel like Astro.com gives the same look to the 12th harmonic as you can get from solar fire.
Well, if you have, like, for example, a bad Hades or a really threatening point in your asteroids, where does that history come from?
Well, the thing that I noticed more than anything is after you get that nuanced understanding from the asteroids, if you just drop the asteroids out and you know the fuller stories of the basic myths of the planets, you can truly see eventually how related it is. But I don't think your average astrologer does know the myths.
Well, it's too much.
It is expansive. And because of that exhaustive material, you'd have to be a Greek literature, ancient civilization studies individual who has a
Scholar,
background.
scholar.
Yes. I'm just a kid who loved myth. I devoured it.
Well, you did a good job.
It really makes a difference, though, when you're trying to pinpoint these things. And now you're going into that work with a young man who has done wild and crazy numbers of research with the Laurentia book. He's got some great thoughts behind that. He knows how to do the research. He
I've,
has the
I've been
skills.
trying to read that book, and I have no idea what he's even talking about.
I don't know that he goes into his process. He just gives you the information on, trust me, this asteroid means that. You know, you got to kind of take it from there and plug it in. And I like to go ahead and look at all my people and see who has prominent conjunctions to the ascendant, who has prominent midheaven and then luminary uh, connections, that I can look at their life. I don't really want to look at a celebrity because I know other people for real. There's history there that I can unpack. I uncover a lot of trauma when I do uh, astrological things. One of the things I'm doing these days, I'm using Caraclo, looking at the first square and the opposition, especially when it turns out they happened early. I asked a young man who had his first square for Caraclo really young, what happened at this date, given and around that month, that year? I zeroed it in with the season because it was really young. And he said something about that. I think he said that was the first time he had encountered a dead body. I asked him the next date, which is the opposition. He said, that's the first date I moved into my first haunted house. Well, he's a Scorpio, and I see him as what I would refer to as a latent or nascent medium. He never knew he had the ability to tap into mediumship. And spirit is conspiring to put things in his life to open him up. In fact, the only reason we know each other is because he went searching for a paranormal team. And the group he found in Pittsburgh listened to his story and says, yeah, you don't need to talk to a team or have somebody investigate your house. You need to talk to Rick. I have those teams around Western PA, half a dozen or more, that will refer people to me when it's something of dealing with spiritual growth and opening up to your gifts. I do believe paranormal experiences, in my view, those brushes with it are an invitation to a deeper relationship with spirit. You don't have a haunting without having a reason and something that is trying to be woken up. And I've seen it happen every single time. That there's a reason. I can see the reason. It's not always easy to explain to people, but I get it. So does anybody else have any questions in regarding the asteroids? Because, yeah, Claudia.
This isn't really a question, and I won't do it if you
Okay.
don't think it's appropriate, but it might be worth for people who want to know about their asteroids.
Yeah,
You can find them on astro.com,
very
and
easily.
I can show people how to do it because you
Oh,
need to
that'd be
know the number.
fantastic.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I use the Control F on a Chrome. So you
Okay.
like if you know the first letter, you can go ahead and populate it, and then like abundance, you'll just go ahead and because they may change the spelling. Like abundance becomes abundantia.
Right.
They Latin. Pittsburgh becomes Pittsburghia. They throw an IA on to the
Yeah,
end
yeah,
of it.
yeah.
This is another thing. I think that with the discovery of Uranus, the immediate next asteroid they found, the first asteroid, was Ceres, the Earth Mother,
Mm-hmm.
which is Demeter or Demetra. And Demetra George ended up rolling with these things. And I think that is an evidence that he is giving voice to marginalized people who have never felt free, because there were some interesting things that took place in women's history. And I think if you look at significant, Susan, this might be helpful for you to pinpoint if you were to look at the events of pivotal moments in history where women experienced advances, success, change, the suffragette moments, and then looked at where Uranus may be, that would be incredible. Go for it.
So if I don't know any of the numbers of the asteroids or names, but I do know where my luminaries and ascendant are, why can't I look things up that way? Because how would I even know what asteroids to look up?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll get you started and tell you there's a site called markandrewholmes.com who has a lot of asteroids fleshed out with some meanings. He not only gives meanings for each of them, he in a short framework, he makes it bolder. He'll share the story behind its name, like, oh, this was named after the astronomer's daughter or something, or uh, uh, the winner of a science fair. Things like that are on there. These come out of nowhere. And then the meaning, and then he'll even use it in some people's charts and say, it's over here, it's over there. And they are people that he knows the nuances of their life, but he doesn't really enumerate that all the time. So you kind of need to go ahead and look the person up if you're not familiar how it's relevant to the area. But he lists them alphabetically, and you can look into them, just peruse them. Anything that you read in a list and you don't know why, but you feel drawn to it, I would say that is your intuition guiding you to see what's that all about. It's a concept that you're connecting with, that's important to your experience of life, and you will definitely be likely to find the answer once you plug it in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Peggy.
Talking about that, I did I did find the list with all the numbers, and I know how to go to astro.com and plug in the
Good.
numbers. You print out your, the extended chart. But I said, I feel something with Reiki, and darn, isn't there an asteroid Reiki? And
Yeah.
then DNA, and there was an asteroid DNA and Atlantis, and there's an asteroid Atlantis, and they all are in my
That's
chart.
forgotten wisdom.
Yeah, and they're all in my chart like 2 degrees off of certain planets.
Right. So
So
you've got
you're
nice,
right.
tight
I
2-degree
felt it.
orbs.
Yeah, and I felt it. So anybody you go in and you read something, you will feel it. So it's worth
Right.
doing.
Like, oh, Reiki? I
Right.
know about that. It feels important to me.
How
And
about
there
do
it is.
you feel these things as transiting points?
They can definitely be if they're triggering big issues. I had a spontaneous past life memory in March of 22. I opened the freezer, and as I opened the freezer, the cold air flooded me and made me see a death in a past life. I immediately knew it was the Alps. I immediately had a return of memory of every memory in this life that I thought, that's weird, that's odd, that's strange, that struck things that were both location oriented to the Alps, event to the death because it was by avalanche. And I thought, I'm going to check and see if there's an asteroid for the Alps. There is, and it was smack dab on my Chiron.
Wow.
And I remembered all the herbs that are listed in the Ricola cough drops as well, which are indigenous to Switzerland. So I know it sounds strange, but it's pertinent. And if it's pertinent, boy, oh boy, that makes a difference. I know I'm sounding like a crazy nutter, but
No, you're not.
it's important for people to be adventurous, to go ahead and make these discoveries.
You're in the crazy nutter group. So you fit right in. We all fit right in with our weirdness.
I guess I
No,
should monocle to go with the top hat.
nobody's hanging up though.
I think we're just special, not weird. That word weird isn't being used very well these days, so I don't want to be labeled with it.
I hear you. I would think twice about giving any regard to someone who would say that it's weird, because honestly, they are too narrow-minded to openly consider something very powerful. One of the if any of you get a chance, there's a Demetra George video that I believe is entitled something about asteroids, windows of fate and destiny. And she talks about a skeptic at one of the early conferences by the name of Schwartz. And she blows his mind with the positioning of certain asteroids. And this dyed-in-the-wool skeptic scientist totally does a 180 and gets deep into the research and eventually is involved in asteroid research and publishing data. So it's remarkably easy to find yourself overwhelmed and feel you should try it.
And think about this, that I've done almost 400 shows on this network that did not have to do with the asteroids. Think if you add the asteroids to it, I mean, it just becomes endless.
Right.
Boy, you could have an asteroid.com, couldn't you?
Oh yeah, for sure. I just find that it helps for me to help bring people to a safe space of healing with their individual traumas. And the asteroids flesh out the nature of the traumas. With the planets, we just see the basics. We see something that hit hard and heavy. The sitter knows what it was, but maybe they don't. They can have a repressed memory and not be able to pinpoint it. If we can zero in with the asteroids, it's right here. This is the little corner of your memory you have to trigger. Oh, because it's more precise with these asteroids than a vague planetary energy. That's the value I see in it. Opening up new pathways to healing.
It's fascinating.
Linda, there's a lot that you're a therapist, if I correct. Linda Sprague, right? Unmute yourself. Unmute, Linda. Hit your button. There we go.
Sorry. Yes. I'm sitting here thinking this is another package of archetypal information. You know, mythology is just collection of archetypal information, and it just gets bigger and bigger. So we find that we're all like a multi-dimensional crystal, and say
Right.
we thought we had 6 points, now we have hundreds of points or whatever, you know, depending on how much archetypal information allow ourselves to take in. So
Right.
like say some people can take in a lot, or they need someone like you to see which of the archetypal information is important that we're carrying, because
Exactly.
we get crazy trying to get it all, you know. So
Right.
you need some help in discerning what's
That's one of the reasons why I ask people about city and state names, colors that are important to them. A greenhouse might mean something. Washington Street might be important. It all can come together. And Washington's going to mean house, state, DC,
yeah, fascinating.
whatever.
Right.
It may be the name on the building where you park your car, you know. And I do have to acknowledge I may have an advantage because I have the asteroid for the Akashic records on my Mercury.
Oh, well, I guess so. Yeah.
I think that does give me a little
Of
leg up.
course. Yeah.
That's
Yes.
not fair. That's not fair.
I know.
It's like a cheat sheet.
You have a superpower that you didn't tell us about. So we're
Right.
here trying to figure out the names and numbers.
Well, I'm also an egghead, so even though I can look somebody in the eye and see things around them, I still want to go ahead and have the chart.
Right. I hear you. Yeah. I would like to say something about astronomers naming things and astrologers interpreting, because I've found that very fascinating, and I don't have a problem with it. I think astronomers, they do it from this, what they think is a left brain place, but
Yeah.
actually it's highly intuitive. And then they give us the name and we go, oh my God, you know, and they get all this information. But I think it's really cool. I mean, I don't know that that happens every time, but naming Uranus based on, you know, the mythological figure Uranus at its
Right.
discovery is like, you know, that's phenomenal. And it's intuitive, you know, like they named
Right.
Sedna, they named that dwarf planet, or is it a dwarf planet, Sedna?
Yeah.
Yes.
Naming that Sedna right at the beginning of like so much environmental distress, you know, and just different things. I just think it's
I think too it may have coincided with the Me Too movement.
yeah, and the Me Too, yeah, because yeah,
Because-
the Me, well, absolutely, yes, the abuse of women, yeah, absolutely.
That's
yeah.
a huge issue in the mythology of Sedna.
Oh God, yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think some of those large things that's another thing. When we talk about space rocks, let's go ahead and consider that perhaps something that sits in the same position and moves very slowly may have more weight.
Yes.
It may
Yeah.
have more astrological significance.
Oh, astrologers are writing about that.
Right.
It's more unconscious. It's more archetypal on a collective level.
Yes. Dimitri George shares a story about the naming of Ceres. It was discovered by an Italian monk, astronomer, and in the observatory in Palermo, in off the coast of Italy, and he chose to name it, giving homage to the Pluto, Demeter, Persephone story, because it is believed that that is the source of the area where Pluto abducted Persephone and took her into the underworld. So and it resulted in the grief and the bereavement of the Earth Mother, who her grief threw the planet into winter. And that's where we get the change of season story. And it's amazing to see how it affects people's issues around food and nurturing and motherhood.
Yeah.
I think of it like a second moon if you're going to look at the moon as mother and how mothering occurs, because Ceres adds another dimension to it, and it's absolutely incredible to look at what Ceres does to that. Some people say Ceres, some say Ceres. There is no C in Greek. It's all K. I don't know how people are still calling it Ceres, except they want to anglicize everything because they're a little bit ethnocentric. They're not aware of other people having different languages.
So if somebody was just starting with asteroids, why not just use the ones that are typically used to start with, like Ceres and
oh yeah, you want to start there.
Pallas and
basics.
Juno, Vesta, and of course Chiron. But
yeah, Hygeia is another one that's early. Hygeia,
right?
Some people, it's the age-old thing of love and relationships. They want to grab Lilith and Eros and find out about their love life.
Oh yeah, right.
So doggone typical. It's not like they were the next asteroids in the row. It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick, what was the name of that? Sorry, the name of that website you mentioned? It was a man's name.
Mark with a K, Andrew Holmes, HOLMES.com.
Okay.
It's a whole list. I just looked it up.
It's a huge list. It's not the whole list.
Well, it's a huge list. I mean,
yes, it is.
I didn't look at the whole thing, but
he has articles also on Pandora, Hidalgo, and what's the other one? There's a third one. Lilith, I think, might be the third. He has articles somewhere on one page for that. There are reasons behind all the ones he chose. Some of these asteroids in the description will give you the time they were discovered. Now, there's a date in September, in the early 60s, on like the 24th of September, where over a 24-hour period, they must have discovered over 1,500 asteroids. They were just knocking them out. And it's because of the advance of telescopes and where it happened to hit. I can't find any times for those, and I'd really like to, because it seems like a bunch of them are there that I want to know about, and it gets hectic. Yeah, Peggy?
Oh, what is the number for the Akashic records? I'm trying to find it, and I can't find the asteroid number for the
I think
Akashic
it's 5881.
5881.
I think so.
Okay, that's a good start.
Yeah, if you just click the A on Chrome when you're, And then you hit Control F, it'll give you a search box, and you can just start writing AKASH, and it'll pop up in the
Okay.
list.
Thank
And
you.
then it tells you
you,
what
Eric.
degree it is in a constellation.
Pardon me?
It tells you what degree in a constellation.
It gives you the zodiac degree and as well as down to the minutes, because sometimes I have so many things populated, I have to go beyond the minutes to the seconds sometimes so that I know which one's where. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
I know that when you're looking at health too, there can be tricky things. Listen to the story of someone who had health crises in infancy, and with a mama bear of an advocate as their parent was, they were accusing the mother of not administering life demanding medication, which infuriated this mother, and gladly they went into the hospital to have the doctors have records of the nurses administering the medication. And then the blood test still showed that the test, it was not registering in her blood. To which I said, well, I'll tell you what I think. We're going to look at your chart and we're going to find a conjunction or some issue with Jupiter and Venus, because the energy of Jupiter is overpowering your kidneys. It's the Venus connection.
Mm.
And there it was. I said it as plainly as that, and it was spot on. And some of these energies, the tighter the orb, the more exacerbated the effect. My best friend had Sun conjunct Mercury in Capricorn in the 6th. Capricorn can give that conjunction a very dark Saturnine perspective every day because of the daily effects of the 6th house. He had it not just on the same degree, he had it within 1 minute. And it was like an explosion of thought, with perseverating thought, putting things out of his head consciously and having them come back. It's just very demanding. It's different if you happen to go ahead and voice it. But as I've tried to explain to people, men and women are psychosocially inculcated by culture completely differently. Men are performance-based the way adults around them will guide them. They try to help channel the boy's energy, get them to do something constructive, take out the trash, walk the dog, clean your room. Did you do your homework? And girls are given spaces to communicate, to be quiet, to talk about their feelings. Nobody seems to really, in certain generations, to ask boys, how are you feeling? That's a very new concept. It's just not, and they're not equipped to know what they're feeling because it's such a weird question to put to them.
Yeah.
They have no experience with, oh, I feel something. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You know,
So it
they have to
must
go
be
ahead and
mad or
play with
happy.
it. What's that, Linda?
There's usually one or two feelings for the male until they get more information. They're either happy or they're mad.
And the mad is because they don't have skills to do sad.
Yeah.
Right. exactly. Mhm.
They don't know how to, they don't know what made you hurt. What did somebody make you feel small? Did someone betray your trust? Were you put in an unsafe place?
Right,
There are so many options,
yeah,
but
Yeah.
they don't know how to tear it apart because they've never had the place and the space to feel safe and explore.
yeah, exactly.
And because of that, they don't have close friendships with, and it's important to have same gender friendships because men understand men better than women can understand men. I think the foolishness of the feminine mystique is to elevate women to the arbiters of emotional understanding for men because they only understand women's emotions firsthand because they don't have the priorities and thinking of a man within them. They only have what they believe to be or are taught to be if they study gender. Because it really does need to be taught to be caught. And I know this is unpopular. I don't think that they grow, that girls grow faster, except for the fact that the deck is stacked against the boys. Had they actually been exposed to the same tools, it would have been an equal race.
And you
But
have to wonder about the transgender boys.
transgender
They
boys,
probably have that as part of their biology, where
well,
they can understand what it's like to be a boy.
the only way is if they would have had their cultural influences come on board with supporting tomboy behavior, to have them be treated like a boy from early childhood.
I've heard that they have different chromosomes where you can actually scientifically prove that this isn't in their mind. You can scientifically prove that there's something in their creation.
That's more often with intersex.
Ah, okay. I haven't gotten into it too deeply, but
Right.
it's nice to know that you can prove it scientifically, that because people are saying, oh, they were like, what are they saying lately? Oh, you go to school and you come back gay, or you come back with a different sex or something.
Right.
Nonsense they're saying.
Yeah, and that's really a lot of people just afraid to recognize the person who stands before them. Because those, I'm sure that a small portion are experiencing some sort of trauma that they need to work through. I think the conservative figures are going to show it to be smaller, but that has to be honored too. That's an issue. Some of these kids are having trauma and it's unidentified.
Could be past life trauma.
Very strongly possible. I have seen pictures of young children in black and white tins that I could tell you they looked like their bags were packed the moment you looked at them. And there's something in the eyes of infants you can even catch, you know?
Yeah.
It's said when they're infants, but they live it out. They demonstrate it. It's not a prophecy being fulfilled because the child said it. It's observable. You can feel this heavy burden that is reflected through the eyes. Thank you so much, Rick, for allowing me to share some of the wild, outlandish thoughts that I have sometimes.
You've been phenomenal.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for taking us into an area that is so little known, and getting that triggered in all of us. Perhaps each of us will find our own way and start to explore this more. I know Martha Lane Westcott, when I was talking to her, she kept telling me, get jazzed. She would say, get jazzed. That was her saying, to get jazzed about the asteroids. Now, I've got that book you were talking about, and I keep opening it up and reading it, and I go, what? 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 Because it's just so far out.
You got to start plugging some of them in and finding who got what that
Yeah,
you
well,
know.
that's what I'm
Start
going
with
to
your
do.
family.
I'm going to start doing that. That's the way to do it. Are you using your asteroids at all on Solar Fire?
Not yet. I haven't figured it out, even though we got the plug in. And the other thing is, I'm having issues trying to figure out how to find the charts that I've plugged in because they're not in the current list. They're somewhere deeper into the files.
Okay, I can help you with that part, but the
Yeah.
asteroid part, just go on to Facebook into that main group and just
Right.
ask them, and they will tell you. They will tell you exactly how to do it because they're very good at it. But anyhow, I want to thank you very much because your whole presentation was just excellent. And I'm just sitting here with my mouth open, looking at all the possibilities. And I want to go find all the ones called Rick.
I did that and I found the one named Richard, just Richard, smack dab on my fourth house cusp, which I consider to be the seat of the psyche
Oh my God.
because that's the home of your mind.
There's just too much, my friend. There's just too much.
Well,
Okay, everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight, and thank Rick Double
thank
Time
you.
here for all of his wonderful
Thank you, Rick.
information.
That was phenomenal.
Thank
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Rick.
Is that John I'm
And it-
hearing?
That's Uncle
It
John.
is. It is.
That's
Hey,
Dr.
Rick.
And it-
John.
It's
And it
That
got
was phenomenal.
recorded.
I'm
This time it got
shocked that it's you.
recorded.
I could still see your microphone red lined, but I was
Oh,
hearing
okay.
your voice. That's what threw me.
Okay.
But
Love
now
to
I-
connect with you soon, Rick. That was phenomenal. That was beautiful. Thank you.
And
Have
maybe
you
we'll
got
have,
any experience with the asteroids yet, John?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you the new. I mean, I have. I mean, I'm gonna look up some Ricks, of course, and I think there's at least one John out there, so probably a Clea too.
Yeah.
now, Linda,
Uh,
Linda, how do you get those multiple hearts to come up? You're
You're
muted.
muted.
You're muted.
I think that Erica mentioned before that under the reactions, you can just do one image like this as a heart, or if you do it as a send with an effect, that's what makes it go ahead.
How
and
do
give
you
the
do?
multiple.
How do you send with effect?
It's in the same block under React.
Under what?
It's on the top. There's a top one and a bottom one.
Yeah, right to the side
Like
of
next to
chat,
share. Look, I
you'll
mean,
see React.
or chat down wherever share and chat are, it should be
At the
down there.
bottom,
Yes, right
The
between
It's in the
share and
middle.
First
chat.
line.
Chat, React,
There's a
participant.
heart symbol on it to begin with. Look for the heart symbol at the bottom.
Right.
I
And
have
when you
no,
open it
I
up,
have
it
no
has two
idea what
lines.
anybody's talking about.
Look at the first
I
line.
don't see it
There's
either
two
at
lines.
all.
Go to reactions and then what?
The first line, send with
Open it.
effect.
How do
I
you open it? Okay.
Click on it.
Yeah,
You
Click
click
on
on
it.
the heart.
icon, Rick.
The word, the
And
heart.
it'll
The
comes-
heart
open
at
up
the
a-
top on the first line.
Click on the
Send
heart.
with effect.
I don't
With
see
the
it.
heart.
I see a
bunch
heart.
of rockets.
A heart says animated reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
just
that's
click
the
on it,
one.
That's
click on
it.
That's the one.
It
That's
ain't
it.
it ain't doing anything.
Does it
Yeah,
say
Click
send
on
with
it.
effect?
You have to click on it
Go with send with effect, heart. That's above
and
that.
click with your with your mouse.
Yeah,
Top one, there's
not
2 lines.
reactions.
Yeah, we see the
Send with
first
feedback.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the one from the bottom. Above it, there's another line, and when you click on those, it gives you like all these things that drift up like that.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, everybody,
Great.
thank you. We'll see you
Hey,
next.
I'm open to questions. If anybody wants to get a hold of me on Facebook Messenger or whatnot, feel free to send me any of your
Absolutely,
contact.
Rick.
So
See you all next
take
week.
care.
Thanks,
Thank
Rick.
you,
Love
Rick.
you.
Thank you, Rick.
Love you. Have a good week.